Hi everyone, Adrian Groenewald of ThinkLead, and it is of course a digital leadership ecosystem, and it's a global platform. I have been rolling out Global Leadership Conversation 2, all about authentic leadership. But this whole coronavirus challenge that leaders face, it's in our faces, it's all over the world. I see the UK even change their strategy now. Everything is changing. I'm seeing a little virus, humble, arrogant, and egotistical leaders all over the world and powerful nations, bring them to their knees. It is something that we cannot just wish away. And although we've had conversations with experts on how to lead during this difficult crisis, I think we need to spend a little bit more time on that. So I've got an interesting leader today, an expert, certainly a human capitalist expert who's tapped into the global and the national HR network, and certainly forming part of the conversation about how this coronavirus, and maybe any calamity, but this one in particular, is impacting our world. And I've decided to move the Authentic Leadership interview, Global Leadership Conversation 2, with my special guest to tomorrow. But right now, we're going to talk to her about the trends and the impact of this. It's Liezel Blignaut, founder and CEO of HCBsolutions. That's for Human Capital Business Solutions. She's with me, and I'm doing my interview via Zoom because we're all isolated, but thank goodness for technology. So Liezel, absolute welcome, and thank you for short notice, accepting on short notice these few questions that I'll pose to you.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to deal with that on the fly, as I think all of us globally are faced with, we need to deal with on the go.
Yeah. Well, you've worked in big organizations. You work with organizations now, even as an independent consultant. You're tapped into a huge, vast HR network, and they're all surely having conversations around this. So your thoughts on coronavirus. And then I want us to look at the impact on the workplace now and in the future, and then we'll get into leadership. But just briefly, what's the temperature out there?
Goodness, the temperature, I think there's a lot of talk out there. I'm part of quite a few WhatsApp groups of HR professionals and HR managers. There is a lot of uncertainty with, we've shifted. In the beginning, it was a lot of talk about, first infection, then infection is growing. How can we avoid the spread? The conversations now, especially in South Africa, is a lot around policy matters. How do we deal with leave? How do we deal with people that show up? How do we deal with people that came to work whose spouse worked for someone that was tested positive? So there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of information out there. And I think people are grappling, especially the smaller companies, are grappling with some very, very key questions about how to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a small company, all your big corporate and government clients are cutting you off right now. They're saying, freeze the work, stop the work, you can't come onto our premises. And in some cases, of course, you can do that virtually, digitally, but in some cases you can't. And the small businesses don't have the buffer. In fact, I don't think our economy really has the buffer to deal with this, and neither do some large corporates. But they do have a longer cycle of feeling the economic pain, potentially. Small businesses feel it this month, next month. No cash flow, can't pay my 2, 3, 5, 10 employees. So the implications are huge. But when you look at the workplace, just expand a little bit more how it's impacting it right now, and also maybe the future trends. I mean, yes, people are speculating that all these digital meetings will continue, perhaps. There will be a realization that we can be, in some cases, just as effective having more Zoom meetings all over the country or the world, as opposed to flying towards a specific boardroom and meeting there. But anything else that we're missing in terms of future trends that may be impacted by the current calamity?
I am curious to see how this will expedite things that we've been talking about for some time. So, for example, things like the VUCA world. I mean, it's been coming up in all conversations and conferences, etc. What are we living in now at this moment with COVID-19? It's extremely complex. It's extremely fast. It's widespread. it has never before required of leadership to act quickly, swiftly, and with humanity. So I'm interested in that. I'm interested to see the impact, expediting it. We've been talking about remote work. We've been talking about virtual work. We've been talking about learning online, etc. And we have the technology not to fly somewhere, but to have a Zoom conversation like this. We've had this for some time already. But I'm curious to see how this will expedite things like this, how this will, for example, expedite bringing things like free Wi-Fi to people who, now, for example, the universities in South Africa that closed, I'm sure, not sure, but I know that many other places as well, university students that don't have unlimited, uncapped, fast Wi-Fi in the places to go and continue their learning online. So I'm interested to see how that we can bring that, for example, now to people that need it. So yes, there's a lot of things that we've had in place, which will now just make it more important to bring it to the people.
Very interesting. Schools. So everywhere, everyone is putting on their thinking hats, their creative hats, and saying, how do we handle this? How do we deal with this? It forces us into our discomfort zone and into thinking creatively and on our back foot. But, okay, the impact on leaders. So we've got all this happening, and I'm a leader who believes in face-to-face contact, or I'm a leader who believes in, I don't have my own social media accounts, and I'm not into technology, or, I mean, just leadership. How do you think this is impacting the leader? I've looked with keen interest at someone like Donald Trump, and I don't want to get into politics, but he's very visible, where he had a very arrogant attitude towards coronavirus. We're in charge, we're in control, it's all fine. And now it's turning him, maybe of necessity and for self-preservation, but it's turning him to becoming more humble and partisan. He's saying, let's work together. We see our president sitting with the opposition parties in the same room today, talking about how do we deal with this. So what is this doing for a leader or leaders, to their style, their approach?
So interesting that you've mentioned Donald Trump as an example, because that was one example that I was going to talk to in our conversation about authentic leadership. So this is not the time to work in independence or in blaming or finger pointing, whatever. This is the time that we need to pull everyone together, because we've got to, we say leadership need to pull everyone towards a common purpose, but here it actually is, we need to pull everyone together towards a common enemy, and the common enemy is COVID-19. So it's interesting to see how leaders will need to, across countries, across political parties, society, healthcare workers, us as employees, leadership in workplaces, how we pull everyone together to flatten the curve and be better off because of this, not worse off. I think a big challenge comes in workplaces and faced with leadership. If you didn't start at the start of this pandemic with a great workplace, and if there was a mistrust issue, and if there was a toxic work environment, you don't actually enter in this situation in your workplace with a very good foundation. So I do pick up, some workplaces that I see that people say, this is not our problem. For example, other people get it, but they don't actually think about the impact that they can actually relay this virus to someone else that, whose health is maybe not as good. So leaders, there's a few things that leaders need to do. I think the one thing is they need to build trust, and they need to bring everyone together to work together on this for the benefit of everyone else. Trust is being authentic self, which we'll talk about tomorrow. It's also communication that, in a time of crisis, you cannot under-communicate. You actually need to dial up communication, because it creates awareness, it builds trust, it creates more certainty in a very, very uncertain situation. So, and I think leaders also, is to show their vulnerability, is that they don't have all the answers. A lot of it we're figuring out as we go along. So, if, for example, we don't know what the policy is yet on how to deal with people that's going to go into self-quarantine, or we don't know yet people that can't do their work from home because maybe they've got field work or they work in a workshop. As that we will figure it out as we go along. So there's a lot of things I think that leaders can do, but they need to know that people want to work. In general, I like to believe that people want to work together to stop and flatline the curve of spreading this.
Okay, and then just as we wrap up, some really good comments, Liezel. I also want to just, how do I take it to myself? Because surely there's a case to be made for, before I can go out there and build trust with leaders, what kind of person must I be? I've got to find my center as a leader before I walk out into the door this morning or tomorrow, where I have to look my people in the eye. Surely if I haven't had trust up till now, I have a big problem and I'm on the back foot. If I have the trust of my force, my workforce, because of how I've led up to this point as an authentic leader, then I'm on the front foot in a sense. So, but wherever I am, I have to humble myself. I have to make myself vulnerable, but I have to put myself in a certain place. Surely I have to, in the morning, before I walk into that workplace, I have to be in a certain frame of mind, a certain space, a certain belief about who I am, about what my role is, my deepest self. I've got to connect with that person. Otherwise, I'm not going to come across as authentic and real. Any comments on that? What can I personally do as a leader, as opposed to communicate better? Yes. Engage my workforce, build trust, speak more, communicate more. Personally, what can I do? Any thoughts on that?
So good question, and not that I always know all the answers. There's leadership begins with self-leadership, and you need to kind of know who you are as a person, and to be open and honest, and to kind of show your vulnerability as well to other people. You also need to understand that this is leadership, and the situation is not about you. It starts with you as a leader, but it's not all about you. You also need to kind of consider, what do other people need from this? What do they need from you as a leader? Because that will kind of pull you towards how can you and other people help you to benefit the other people in the workplace, for example. How can you work together? So I don't know if that answer makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Liezel. Any other message you want to give leaders out there with the context of what we find ourselves in right now?
I think, going back to working together in collaboration, this is now the time to do that. This is not the time to focus only on you. This is not the time to go on and create this us versus them, in terms of how can we milk the system in terms of, and I'm not only talking about leaders, I'm talking about everyone in the workplace. How can we milk the system and use this opportunity to go and sit at home, for example, if we don't really need to? So I think there's a few things that really, we have the potential to everyone work together. We must just find out how to leverage that.
Thank you so much, Liezel Blignaut of HCBsolutions, Human Capital Business Solutions, giving us some of your views on the current coronavirus crisis and what leaders can do in the workplace. I really appreciate it. I guess it does come down to me, and we've had that in other conversations. Yes, leadership is important right now, but right now we need every person to lead themselves and be responsible and tap into your best self, me, my best self, you, your best self, and it'll make it easier for leaders too. We don't need any egos. We honestly need people to bring their best selves to the fore. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck, and be safe.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Adrian.